So in this video, I'm just going to show a few of the highlights of the TBC 5.6 release in rapid fire succession here. The first one is the ability to use the shift and right click menu. So you're probably all familiar with the fact that when you click on a line, when you right click on it, you can get the context sensitive menu that relates to the object that you've selected. So these functions here are context sensitive to the type of object I selected. So if I pick a piece of text, I'll get one set of options here. If I pick a line or a polygon, I'll get a different set of options right here. Now what we've done in TBC 5.6 is if we hold the shift key out when we highlight a line and we do a shift key and right click, you'll see that we get this menu now, which is some of the other CAD functionality that you might want when you've got CAD objects selected, like copying objects, moving objects, scaling, rotating, changing elevation, and explore object. And you get this amongst these other functions that are always there, your select methods, your properties methods, and then your recent commands on the right side. So those are very similar between the shift and right click and the right click menus. These are all the same over here, but this is the bit that's different in here. So that's the shift and right click menu is going to be your friend for getting access to some of the sort of standardized CAD controls. In TBC 5.52, Trimble changed the imported files list so that it always sorted objects by alphabetical order. A lot of people requested that the old original import file order was better, and they wanted the option to do that. So what Trimble has done here is you can go in here, right click on this, and you can change to sort by file name or sort by imported file order, which will change the order of the list here. This is a very handy trick to be able to change this so you know which files you ordered in which order and which were the most recent files that got imported, etc. So again, a great little trick, right click on the imported files list and change to sort by file name, or right click and change to sort by imported order, and that gives you what you need. Okay. One of the things that we found with the MSI Manager is the ability to copy and move information around within the MSI Manager from one category to another, or between the internal library and the external library. So in this release, Trimble's added the ability to do those changes for you. So here we can go into the MSI Manager, and if I look at the materials list here, I've got materials in the earthen select, and I've got materials in the earthen category. If, for instance, this one here belonged in the earthen category, then I can use this button up here to move it, or I can right click on it here and say move, and when I move it, it asks me which category I want to put it in. I can say earthen, okay, and now aggregate has been moved from here up to here. Now in this case, you can also delete that again. And here you can also do a movement from an internal library to an external library. So again, if I want to take a number of these objects down here, I want to move them down to the materials category. Let's just put them down here. In the past, you would have grabbed them here and dragged and dropped them down. What I can do now is I can grab these here, and I can actually say I want to now copy to library. And when I do that, you'll see it adds them down here. If I want to bring them back the other way, then I would just highlight them down here and bring them back up the other way. So again, you can update your libraries and that kind of thing by using the move function to move things from one category of material to another, or one site improvement to another. And you can do the same thing from the internal library to the external library, or the external library to the internal library, which makes it faster and easier to move data around between these library elements, and it makes the site improvement management over time a little easier to manage. Okay. In previous releases of TBC, there was a command called create profile proxy that was always available, but only as a keyboard-only command from the command pane. In this release, Trimble's made it available to everybody as a command, and we've added it now to the menus here. It's called create profile proxy. And the way it works is basically you create three-dimensional lines that represent features that follow the line. So in this case, this line going longitudinally here is a water main, for example. These lines going across the road here might be culvert locations, and you want to superimpose those in the cross-section view or in the profile view here. This one up here has already been done. You can see this one here is a profile of a culvert going across here, and this is how it superimposes against the alignment. You can see here that the two ends are actually very close to each other in terms of station. So in terms of the length that it occupies along the length of the line here is very short. Whereas this one over here is going to be longer because it occupies more station range. And this one here occupies nearly the full station range. So how do we use the command? We run create profile proxy, we pick the alignment, and we've created a profile view already of the alignment and the ground profile through the alignment. And now we just want to superimpose these extra lines to that. So now we can just pick the lines that we want to add. Click on this one, click on the water main, click on this culvert right here, and click on this culvert up here. That adds the lines. You hit those 4 and you hit OK. That means they all superimpose on here. They all get projected onto the profile of the alignment. And so you can see here now that the water main starts just after the start of the alignment here, and it ends before the end of the alignment on the other end. Okay, so you can see it ends here. You can see these culverts occupy differing amounts of space depending on what angle they cover the profile. Where the center line is where it crosses right here, and then of course the end point here is where it's at one end, and the end point over here is when it's at the other end. The next culvert is back here. You can see it occupies very little space. This one up here occupies more space. So this is the higher end station. This is the lower end station. You can see the slope, and you can see the difference in elevation between the two endpoints superimposed on the profile line. Now all this is plottable, printable, and labelable in the profile view, so you can take any of this drawing element and put it out onto a drawing sheet using standard plotting techniques. So anyway, that's create profile proxy. We've added it to our advanced modeling tab in the corridors group, and you'll find it on the TBC menus, or you can find it in the command pane list of commands. Thank you. Along with a couple of minor defects in vertical design that have been corrected in this release, we've added some additional functionality to the ability to connect a network of lines like the one shown here and automatically elevate lines from a source line. How does that work? So if I go to the data prep or advanced modeling techniques and I go to vertical design, I can find it on the menu here. And in here we're going to say pick the lines we want to make a vertical design. Give it a name, we'll call it VD, and say OK. And now it's created the vertical design, and these are all two-dimensional lines. So we can see in the lines group, these are all two-dimensional, just standard polylines. None of them are locked because they're all two-dimensional. So if I now go to the Rules tab here, and let's say I want to elevate the first line. So I can pick any line in this group to elevate. So let's say I'm going to give it an elevation of 100, and I'm going to give it a start coordinate somewhere here. By doing that, we just elevated all of the lines, actually. So let's take a look at it in 3D. So if we look at this in 3D here, well, in here we actually created the lines, but in the vertical design here, I didn't have this checkbox checked. So if I check this checkbox here, and then go back to here, you can see instantly all these lines got elevated. So by saying this line is 100, what it's done is it said this must be 100, therefore this must be 100, therefore this must be 100, this must be 100, this must be 100. So it changes all of the elevations as you go. But let's say I go back and add another elevation. I want to add one up here somewhere. So let's say we want to add another elevation rule of 120, and this time we're going to say that's this point right here. So that now creates the slope on this line, and again, by putting a slope on this line, it comes in at 100, goes out at 120, and there's a slope between here and here. That sets the elevation here, which automatically triggers the elevation of this line, this line, this line, and this line. So now this line is set at 120. What happens now if I put an elevation control up here? Let's do an elevation rule of 130 here, and let's say I want to put that up here somewhere, and say no to that. That adds this rule through here. So now let's see what happened now. So this line is 100. This is 120. This is now somewhere in between. This is set that point. This one is 130. So this line slopes. And now this line here, here, and here is all computed off that line. So again, by putting a network of lines together here, we're linking them together without having to use connection rules whatsoever. We can actually bring all the line work together, elevate it all directly from each other, and you get a network of roads or alignments that are now nicely linked at these common locations when they all started off as 2D locations. Now this works for elevation rules for sure. It doesn't necessarily work for every type of rule type. For example, I found that a grade rule didn't work But anyway, this is a nice improvement to the command to save you having to put connectors in everywhere where two lines touch at a common point. Okay, thanks. A couple of small changes in the CAD Layer Manager function. If you go to the Layer Manager here, we open up the Layer Manager view, and changes that have been made. I'm not sure if they were both made this release or not, but certainly this one was. The filter control. If in here you've got your sheets set up or your layers set up with prefixes, for example, you can type in a prefix here and then hit enter, and that will then filter your layer list down to just the layers that begin with that. So if I type in like sheet, that's my sheet layers, and if I type in FG, that's my finished grade layers. Now you can also just type in, for instance, if I type in XS tab, that's all my CAD XS layers because they contain the XS wildcard. This is a regular expression. The simplest way to type it in is just the starting text if you're using prefixes. But if you're looking for something specific, you can filter the layer down, and you make all your changes in here for that layer set, and then you can change this back to the full filter just by deleting this and enter, and that puts the full filter back again. The other thing that was changed, I'm not sure if it's in this release or not, is the ability to change the width of the columns in here, which means all the text can be now read relatively easily in the Layer Manager. So these are nice little changes to the Layer Manager control. Often when you're QAing or checking strings on a model, you want to determine the slopes between two elements, either along strings or along cross-section lines. In this example, I'm using two strings to calculate the slopes between pairs of points across the strings here. So I use the measure command. Measure command allows us to do from and to, so I can pick from and to, and now it tells you the offset distance. But over here in this report, it's telling you not only the offset and slope, it also tells you the slope distance and the slope values down here now. Once you've actually created that, you can hit save here, and when you hit save, it actually asks you what layer you want to put it on, and then you can hit save. That now updates that record. If I do the same thing for this one and hit save, and then do the same thing with this one, and then the same thing with this one, and then the same thing with this one right here. And then this one. Now you can see when I hit save, it actually does offer me the option to change this to a different value. So if I just change this to slope value, then you can see it showing me the slope value on each of these now as I go. So if I close out of here, if I pick all these distance measurements here, I could have done that by layer or whatever. Now I can go up here and I can change this to the slope value. And now you can see quickly, I can see it's a 2% cross slope here, 2% here, 4%, 4%, 2%, and then 2%. So very quickly I can change these values to be for instance, the slope distance across the pavement. It could be the horizontal distance across the pavement. It could be the difference in height across the pavement between these measurements here. It could be the azimuth of the bearing here, or it could be the slope value across the pavement here. So again, nice easy way to generate little labels and little annotations that you can use to calculate things that could then be used in tables, in side slopes, or in corridor models, or in Slope Designer, etc. It's another nice little tool here, the measure command. When you create points, either through importing SPJ files from Fieldworks, SiteWorks, Trimble Access, etc., or whether you create points by manually entering the information during a takeoff, you can use the feature code library functionality of TBC to add attributes to objects. If I take a look at the feature code library for this particular job here, I can look at the utilities features, for example, for manholes, and I can see that in here we've got a series of attributes set up for things like number of connections, the invert elevation, rim elevation, along with photographs, the type of manhole, and the utility group that it belongs to, for example. When we do that, and we do things like trees, so I go to, let's say, go to vegetation features here rather, and go down to trees. Again, trees have attributes, and we can put in like canopy spread, condition, height, tree type. So depending on whether you're doing as-built surveys, pre-site topo surveys or whether you're doing just traditional land surveys, the ability to do feature-coded survey either through feature data collection in the field or whether it be through point creation in the office, the points come in with a set of attributes. Here's some example trees that were collected in the field, and here you can see the attributes that were associated with them. If I go up over here, you've got some manhole objects that were collected here for sewer manholes, and here you can see the manhole attributes right here. If I click on these different features here, you can see they have rim elevation, invert elevation, etc. So if I then want to create labels on these points, or I want to create tables on them, here's some example tables that we've generated from that data using the new functionality of TBC 5.6. There's a function that allows us to put attributes, select the attributes that we want to put, and define the header of the columns, the text that you want to see there, and then it will populate all the attributes directly from here, which is great for building things like tree schedules, manhole schedules, or any other object where you've put in user-defined attributes. So when you're doing a takeoff, you can create feature codes onto which you can define attributes. So when you create a point, it will stop and ask you for those values. When you've entered all the values, you can then grab all these with the table functionality in the drafting menu, which is label tables for points, lines, or polygons, and it will populate the information into these tables directly. If we want to label these points, when I come to here, I can also use the point labeling routine. If I go to point labeling, and in here I use an example, a tree label here. Again, I can select the point I want to label, just this one here, and you can see it labels the information with selected information with a prefix in each case to show me what I wanted to see. And again, this is all user definable in the styles. So if I go to point label styles, for example, if I go to the label style manager, wherever that is here, if I look at the label style manager for points, and I take a look at the tree structure here, you can see here that this is how it's defined here. And in the attribute definition, when we actually go into this attributing function, if I click on this field here, you can see this is the format, and this is all defined in the help system. You can see the definition here. It's basically you put in a curly bracket the height value, or the attribute name rather, and then you put in after the curly bracket $$ to separate them. This is the next attribute, tree type, and then curly bracket $$, and then curly bracket trunk radius meters, and again curly bracket at the end. So as long as you define the attribute names exactly as they were collected by looking at these attribute names over here, then you can define which ones out of the list of these will show up on each of the point labels. When you look at it for the label table styles, I go to label table style manager. Again, I'll just show you one for the point label styles. If I go in here and say, let's take a look at the manhole schedule, for instance, in this case, this is what the manhole schedule is going to look like. And here we've got name, northing, easting, elevation, and user-defined attributes selected here. And then the column text, this is how you define it for label tables. So the first bit of text here is the heading that you want in the column, curly bracket with the attribute that you're going to pull from, curly bracket followed by $$, and then the next one. And between the word utility and the curly bracket, there's the vertical bar, which is the on the key just above the enter key on your keyboard. So you've got utility, vertical bar, bracket, util, bracket, $$, and then the next attribute. And again, you put the number of attributes in here, and it will fill it out for your table. So you can define tables for all sorts of types of attributed objects that you might have collected through takeoff or through field data survey. Again, great new features for producing labels and tables on drawings that you might want to give to your field crew with additional information. So the features that I've just covered here in this highlights reel are just really some of the features and enhancements that have been made in this release. There are many, many additional functionality, including point cloud functionality, UAS master photogrammetry functionality, mobile mapping, tunneling, that we don't really cover so much from a Rockpile solution standpoint. But this release really is a big release, and it really contains a lot of really powerful features and functions. And my recommendation is take the release but make sure you make a copy of your 5.52 so that you can always get back to it should you need to. But I believe this product is stable, reliable, and is going to do a nice job for you. And the new functionality is well worth trying out. Okay, thanks for your time. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll like 5.6.